Lewis, I'm going to come to you first. We are playing in a Superflex rookie Dynasty mock draft. Who is the 101 for you coming out of a combine?
It's still Caleb Williams for me. I'm not hugely bothered about the not handing over medical details and not talking with teams and not testing at this point. He's the best player in the class at the most important position. It's obviously still a debate between him and Marvin Harrison Jr., but to me, it's still Caleb Williams at 101.
Rich, 1-2.
It's Marvin Harrison for me. He's still a knock above, but I do think if I'm owning 102s, if it stays as expected, I'm potentially looking to move back to the 104 here because I think he's very much in a tier along with May and Neighbours.
What would you want on top of the 1-4 to move back from 1-2?
I'd take a second. I think you can get a lot more than that, but I'd take a single second.
Lovely. And Lewis, okay then, so we've kind of got past the two fairly obvious picks. What's the 1-3 for you?
To me, I don't think we're past the obvious ones yet. So this is still Drake May to me. He's my QB2. He spent a lot of time in the offseason as my QB1, and then has swapped with Caleb Williams in the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 weeks. I still love what I'm seeing on tape. I still think he's a much better athlete than people give him credit for. The arm's there, the prototypical size is there. He's a much safer prospect than Jaden Daniels, and I still think he'll go second overall to the Commanders, which is actually looking like a pretty good situation with the weapons around him.
If Drake May goes to the Commanders, how much of a bump would that give to Terry McLaurin in your eyes?
Not a huge amount. I think we've been led slightly astray by the performances of CJ Stroud this year to make us think that rookie QBs can perform immediately. So I think with obviously, if they could develop a bit of a rapport in the long term in Dynasty, it could be interesting. I wouldn't in redraft be immediately interested in seeing Terry McLaurin because chances are rookie QBs are always going to struggle. The other thing with Terry McLaurin is he's sneakily kind of old. So he's 28. He'll turn 29 in this season, which doesn't feel right because he's only been in the NFL for what, 4 seasons. So yeah, it came out in 2019. So to me in Dynasty, I think he might have the ability to perform better with Drake May as the best quarterback he's played with so far, but I don't think immediately he's going to see a huge uptick in production.
Yeah, I mean, we're not the biggest Terry McLaurin fans here in the sanctuary, but it does seem like whatever happens, whatever quarterback play he's got, he's still going to go out there, get 75 receptions every year, about 1,000 yards, and score 4 or 5 touchdowns. So I don't mind him as a buy low if you find somebody who's completely down on him, but I completely understand what you're saying. Rich, 104.
It's Malik Neighbours for me. The last in a tier, absolutely elite, electric with the ball in his hands, and think he's going to be a superstar for years to come.
So if we're saying that this is the tier break, how much would it cost for you to move back out of this tier to say like the 1-7? Like, because if you're losing a tier of player, I always feel like I want to get an overpay on that deal. Like, are you staying fast and just being like, no, I really believe in Malik Neighbours? Or if you got a really good deal, would you do it?
I guess for me, this is a tier. I think consensus would have Jaden Daniels in this tier along with the 4. To move back to 107, I'd need probably a future first. It is a massive drop off for me from 4 to 7.
Yeah. Okay. Lewis, would you have taken Malik Neighbours there at 4?
104 is maybe my least favorite pick because I think the answer when it comes down to it is yes. But I hate not taking a quarterback when there's going to be another top 5 quarterback in that slot. I hate taking a positional player ahead of him. So I probably would have taken Malik Neighbours, but I have a feeling that if I find myself with a 104, I'm going to stress about it and hope that Drake May falls there.
It is tricky. I mean, you go back, last time that we kind of had this many quarterbacks going in this area was like the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. Yeah. One player who kind of slid down to that sort of 104 to 107 range was Jamar Chase. And in hindsight, definitely the better asset, maybe apart from Trevor Lawrence. But Lewis, who are you going with the 105?
So I would go with Jaden Daniels here. And I say that as someone that, he's my QB3, but I still feel like I'm slightly lower on him. But that's just because the community at the moment, there's lots of people that see him as the QB2. I saw him actually being mocked as the 101 recently. And I can see the upside. But to me, I worry about him. I worry about him being able to stay in the pocket. I worry about him being able to take hits at the slender frame. But if we're talking about range of outcomes, there is a world in which Jaden Daniels is the most valuable player in this class in 2 years' time. There's also a world in which he's doesn't have a starting job anymore in 2 to 3 years' time. So I would take him here. It's really an upside pick, but I would feel scared about it, and I would prefer to have kind of a solid veteran behind him as my QB3 if I was taking Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels is the kind of player who, in previous years, I've been very in on dual threats, very outspoken about how much I feel like they're the key to fantasy. But if you can go on YouTube and type in highlights of Jaden Daniels getting trucked, it just doesn't feel like a good sign. He plays football in the same kind of way that Anthony Richardson does, but Anthony Richardson has like 60, 70 pounds on him. Like it just,
Yeah.
It's really difficult for me to see how he's going to stay healthy through the first full season unless he takes a page out of Lamar Jackson's book and starts getting airborne to take the hits without getting airborne up to the point where he's getting his stomach into the shoulder of the oncoming defender. So there's part of me that's like, you go and look at Jaden Daniels' highlights and they are incredible. But I'm a little bit worried about what kind of situation he finds himself in. And I think 105 feels fine. Before we move on to Rich's 106 pick, though, five subscribers away from 1,700. Want to hit 2,000 by the time of the draft's here. It's a long way to go, and I need your help. Just hit that subscribe button right now. Rich, 106.
Yes, I'm going to go Troy Franklin here. This is a pick. If this was a live draft, I'd be moving back a couple of spots here because I think I'm ahead of consensus there. But as I said earlier, when we were talking about him, I love the route running ability. I love his ability to take the top off the defense, and I think that he could be a slightly boom bust fantasy option, but certainly an option that's going to put up a lot of fantasy points.
Lewis, were you expecting that?
I was expecting that because I know Rich and I know Rich's rankings. But I also know, I can agree, and we'll come on to this in about kind of 8 picks or so. I know that we're taking an exercise here to talk through the players that we have ranked here rather than who we would actually take in this situation.
Okay, so where are you going at the 107?
So it's a toss-up between 2 players to me that are in a tier above Troy Franklin. I think I probably would go with Rome Odunze, just because I value a potential top 24 wide receiver over a potential top 5 tight end. Now, I would feel silly missing out on Brock Bowers if he explodes the way that we think he will. But this is something we've spoken about quite a lot before, about the value of that top 5 tight end, especially with the landscape the way it is at the moment, that I would just rather take the shot on a potential wide receiver 1.
So we've got a question in the chat. I guess it's going to you, Rich. How close do you have Franklin and Brian Thomas?
I've got Matira apart. I've got Brian Thomas as my wide receiver 6. Troy Franklin my wide receiver 3. So yeah, it is definitely a drop down. I think that Brian Thomas is a bigger framed one-trick pony, whereas I think that Troy Franklin has got a little bit more route running ability and a little bit more nuance to his game, whereas I think Brian Thomas is just a guy that goes deep and catches balls over small defenders and can't really do much else.
So Brian Thomas is one of the names that maybe we should have talked about before this, because coming out of the combine, he ran a very fast 40, particularly for his size. Do you think that's something which you can leverage in your drafts? If you know that there's somebody who's a Brian Thomas fan, are you immediately trying to leverage those picks to get them to come up and take him?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, this is the area of the draft where I think I can scoop up the most value, because I know the guys that I'm looking to draft here are unlikely to be going around ADP here. So I'm absolutely looking to, move back, pick up additional assets, potentially move out of the picks altogether, because I know the guys in this ADP range, I'm not taking probably for another 3 or 4 picks. So I'd very rarely be looking to take a guy like Troy Franklin or anybody else in this, because I know that Brian Thomas is coming off the board. I know that Brock Bowers is coming off the board around here in ADP.
Well, it is your pick, Rich. Are you going with Brock Bowers? Are you stopping the slide?
No. I'm going to go the quarterback position. We've had a few chats in the Discord, in our members only Discord, about Brock Bowers and how I view the tight end position. But for me, we're talking Superflex, a guy that could potentially be a top 4 pick in the NFL draft. Getting him at 108 seems ridiculous value right now.
Joe Milton?
JJ McCarthy.
Okay, so Lewis, I mean, we started doing these mocks pretty early on. Brock Bowers was going like in the 1-4. He was like that first non-quarterback wide receiver off the board, quite comfortably going a few picks earlier. Are you comfortable taking him at this point, or do you just not see the value in taking this sort of top 8, top 9, top 10 tight end?
I would take him here. I was really hoping that Rich was going to go for Sam Hartman and do some hair-based drafting off the back of the combine, because I know that like lots of the athleticism stuff doesn't matter, but a good set of locks really does for your rankings. No, it's Brock Bowers for me here. I think just because, and there's a debate between him and the fastest man in NFL history, but I think here he's slipped enough that I'm pretty comfortable with it, especially because if I'm picking around this range, we've got ourselves all the way down to the 109. I'm probably a relatively good team. I've at least made playoffs, so I can afford slightly more luxury in that potential upside pick of the tight end one overall.
So, Lewis, where would you like to see Bowers land? Because we've talked about this plenty of times, that draft landing spot doesn't really matter at certain positions, but at the tight end spot, we've talked about how like it really kind of does. You need a good scheme, you need the right system. Where would you ideally like to see Brock Bowers go?
Yeah, I think the big one which people talk about is obviously the Chargers, which I think could be really interesting. I see a lot of talk about him to the Colts, which I think could potentially be a good landing spot for him as well. I mean, I think my current one is I'd quite like the Rams, not necessarily for fantasy, but just for myself. And he could be the kind of guy that you could start to see slide. I actually looked into recently in terms of the number of targets that you need at the tight end position to finish as a top 6 tight end. And basically, the average target share over the last 3 seasons is 19%, and no tight end had finished in the top 6 with a target share of less than 16%. And only 4 across that span had less than 100 targets. Basically, you want him to have about a 20% target share and more than 100 targets. So I don't think you want to see him go to, if he's to slip that far, the Rams or the Bengals or teams with established wide receivers already. I think for fantasy, you want to see him go to the Chargers would be decent, the Colts would be decent, the Jets as well I could see as a decent landing spot without anything aside from Garrett Wilson. I think, the landing spots that we think about, wow, imagine him playing with these elite players. You actually don't really, for fantasy, want him to be playing with other elite players. You want him to be, at worst, the number 2 option in the offense.
Rich, how do you feel about what Lewis said there? Do you agree on all that?
Yeah, I agree pretty much with everything he said. I think he is an elite talent. I'm a George fan. I absolutely love watching Brock Bowers play. But I just think that I can't get on board with, I guess, the return on investment of, for him to pay off as a top 6 pick, he needs 3 or 4 top 6 seasons. And I just don't think, in terms of, that's probably going to happen, but I don't know in terms of bankable outcomes whether I could take that over a guy like Franklin or a Dunze, who I think could have top 36 seasons at the same rate and essentially produce equivalent value. So that's where I'm going. But I'd go here. Lewis alluded to him, the fastest man in NFL history. I'm happy to take Xavier Worthy here. This is where I was taking him before the combine. So yeah, very happy to be taking him in there now.
So Harry in the chat asks, is Henry Ruggs a better comparison than John Ross when we were talking? If you had to put a comparison on Xavier Worthy, does anyone stand out, Rich?
I really hate comparisons, so I struggle with this.
That's why I asked you.
But no, I'm trying to think back to Henry Ruggs size-wise. I think Xavier Worthy is a far better all-round player and a far better nuanced route runner than Henry Ruggs. I think Henry Ruggs was very much a one-trick pony. I want to say Ruggs was about 190 as well in terms of size. I think he was a bit taller, probably he's probably about 6 foot 190, I reckon, off the top of my head. So different size and very different route running ability. So I wouldn't say Henry Ruggs was a particularly great comparison for him. I think Worthy can do a lot more as an all-round receiver than Ruggs. I don't have a great comparison because I don't like them, so I try to avoid them at all costs.
So Ruggs was 5'11" and 188, so you weren't too far away.
I'm taking that. I'm taking that 6 foot 190. I'll take that.
Lewis, 111. Where you going with the pick here? One of these very late round one picks.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about him already, but I think it's Brian Thomas for me at this point. I like what I'm seeing in terms of the athleticism. He had a really stellar combine. I liked what I saw from him coming out. So yeah, I mean, we've spoken a lot about Brian Thomas already, but I'm at the 111. I'm quite happy with him. And
Rich, last pick of round one.
Yeah, so I'm basing this on the fact that I'm a contender. I've got a team ready to build. So I'm going to take Jonathan Brooks. Yes, I've got to deal with the fact that he's potentially going to go on pup, potentially even redshirt his rookie year, given that ACL injury. But I think if he didn't have that ACL injury, we'd be talking about him in and around Troy Franklin, Rome Odunze, quite frankly. So yeah, I love the value that I can scoop here and hope that my team's good enough to carry me for the first half of the season at least.
And I think that's going to be something which we're going to see more and more over the next month, 50 days or so. We are going to see running backs creep in because regardless of the fact that it's not, we're not getting Bijan Robinson, we're not getting Jahmyr Gibbs, we're not getting Devin Achan. There are running backs who are going to be serviceable, and it's such a high turnover position in Dynasty, and the amount of teams who are going to be competitors or feel like they're only a running back away. It might not be there in like DLF ADP or a lot of the big sites that collate them or Sleepers ADP. But I think what's going to be common in a lot of people's drafts is seeing those running backs sneak in. Lewis, did you have any kind of thoughts for running back in this range?
I am debating. So Rich and I have the same RB1 in Jonathan Brooks. At this point in the cycle, I am so much more confident in scouting wide receiver than I am running back. So I have a lot of opinions on the wide receiver class and not a huge amount on the running back, or I feel less confident in my evaluations. So at this point in the cycle, I feel much happier taking wide receivers and also the nature of the class. But a lot of it comes down to my own process and my own skills and abilities that I'm much more confident in my evaluation at the wide receiver position. I do think now is when you can start taking shots on the running back class, but I'm not going to. And I'm going to go with one of the other winners of the combine, which is a player that is really quite controversial at the minute that people either seem to love or hate, and that's AD Mitchell. 4.34 40, 97th percentile adjusted spark, 92nd percentile speed score. No agility drills, which slightly worries me because the lateral movement wasn't fantastic from what I saw, but he was one of only 2 wide receivers at the combine since 2015 to run 4.35 or less in the 40 whilst measuring at least 6'2" and weighing at least 205 pounds, the only other one being DK Metcalf, which I think is a relatively reasonable comparison. AD Mitchell is quite raw, but it also wouldn't surprise. Quite similar to Jaden Daniels in the sense of like it's really an upside pick, and he's definitely going to go in the first round in the NFL draft. So being able to get a first round talent in the second round would be something I'd be quite happy with.
Rich, would you have gone AD Mitchell there, or are you a bit lower in consensus on him?
No, I'm not a fan of AD Mitchell, so yeah, I'd have left him out on the board for quite a while yet. No, I'd have gone Trey Benson. I think the running back here is that really confused me what was going on there. I'm going Trey Benson. I think he's got the chance to be the first running back drafted in the NFL draft. I think we saw the explosion, the athleticism in terms of that. I think what was he 94th percentile speed score. Really decent all-round prospect, and I think he's probably one of a handful of guys in this class that you could argue could be a true 3-down workhorse.
Lovely. Lewis, back to you. Where are you going?
I am debating between taking my guy here or later, but I think I'm going to wait and go back to quarterback and go to Bo Nix at my QB5. Someone that he didn't have the best combine, but I don't really care about the combine for quarterbacks. I thought he was maybe the most pro-ready of the next tier of quarterback. I liked his pocket presence. I liked his mobility. I liked his footwork. I thought he was quite accurate on the move. I think there's a world in which, we always beforehand go, there might be 8 quarterbacks in the first round in this draft, and there never are. But I think he has a real chance to go in the first round. And I think especially if there's that really early run, if you see someone trade up with the Cardinals to take JJ McCarthy at 4th overall, then I think it almost guarantees someone else taking Bo Nix in the first round. And if he's taken in the first round, then 203 would be an absolute steal for him.
Yeah, I think if that happens, yeah, he's definitely going to be kind of fringe back end of round 1 in certain drafts, just because, I think people are going to talk themselves into it because we saw so many quarterback injuries last year and so many teams were decimated. In our Discord, it seemed like every single week we were having a pity party for everybody who just lost another quarterback and was down to like one quarterback and scrabbling around on waivers for the guys like Aiden O'Connell and Joe Flacco's of the world. But yeah, Rich, 204, where are you going?
So I'm going to go Keon Coleman. We've talked about him before. I don't love the route running ability, but I think that level of athleticism, that ability with the ball in his hands, at this point is worth taking a flyer on.
Nice. Lewis, would Keon Coleman have been in play for you?
He's not my next wide receiver, but I'm intrigued enough by him to consider him around this point. I probably and I think I'm going to go back to the running back well. Although I say back to the running back well, I actually haven't picked a running back yet, because I do have a guy that I want to talk about later. But if we're playing the way you would in a real Dynasty draft, I know that Rich isn't going to take this player anytime soon. So I'll probably go Bucky Irving, who obviously we've spoken about already as a combine loser. But we spoke about in that moment about that I like what I'm seeing with Bucky Irving, and that I think he has a potential to work in the NFL, especially as one of the backs left. One of the backs that's better with out of the backfield, working routes out of the backfield. So I would go with Irving in this spot.
Rich, is this kind of where Bucky Irving's fallen for you post combine?
This is about where I'd be taking him. I think post combine is ADP. I wouldn't be shocked if it fell a little bit further, to be honest. I think there's some people that are talking that maybe not taking him in the top 2 rounds. For my pick here, though, I'm going to take the final of the elite QBs, if you want to talk it that, although I still think there's one more guy that could be in that conversation. I'll go Michael Penix. I think that he's, who knows, if he ends up as a first round pick, this is incredible value. If he goes day 2, this is probably a slight reach. So we'll sit in the middle and we'll grab him here.
Okay, let's we'll rattle through these last kind of 6 picks. Lewis, 207.
I'm gonna. Can we rattle through everything but this one?
Yeah, fire away, my man.
So I'm going to take Jalen McMillan here, who I've spoken about in the Discord and spoken about on Twitter. Is the guy that I fall in love with at the minute. I really love the route running. I think he's really solid through contact. I think he's got really solid hands. I think he didn't blow the combine away, but he did pretty well at everything, which is kind of what you want to see. I really value, and perhaps this is my Jonathan Mingo learnings, that I'm really starting to value that route running ability much more so than kind of the physical tools, and not just looking for chasing alphas. And I'm about to hit like Fantasy Sanctuary bingo by talking about Jonathan Mingo and then talking about the Calvin Johnson theory as well. But Jalen McMillan for me is a player that I really like. I think if he hadn't got injured last season, he would be kind of vaulting up draft boards, and I'd be very happy taking him around this range. But you don't have to. You can get him midway through the third, but we're not going to draft all the way into the third, so I'll take him now.
So he's clearly your guy for this year. Where do you want him to land?
I think, to me, I'm quite happy with him for anyone that needs a slot weapon. So I'm quite happy with him in Cincinnati taking over the Tyler Boyd role. But when you look at a lot of the depth charts at the minute and teams that are very wide receiver needy, I even wouldn't mind him landing with the Patriots, just because he's not an alpha, he's not an X, but he could be the wide receiver one on that team pretty easily.
Rich, 208.
So I'm going to go to the tight end. Well, I'll go JT Sanders here. I think that, look, everybody's hyping up Brock Bowers, but Sanders is a fantastic player. I think, the athleticism wasn't quite where we wanted it to be at the combine, but I still think he's a phenomenal player. I think he's great in space. I think he's great in the ball in his hand. So love the value here.
And whereabouts do you think he's going to end up being drafted in the actual draft?
I think probably mid round 2 is what I've seen. I know that there's a lot of people that have suggested the Panthers might grab him. Maybe at the beginning of the round 3. I'd be shocked if he fell that far. Probably mid to late round 2 would be a nice spot for him.
Cool. We are 3 more subscribers away from 1,700. Let's get it done tonight. Help us help you. So much rookie content coming your way in the next month or so. Lewis, 209.
I'm going to take Vlad McConkey. I actually think this is pretty low for him because he's been rocketing up draft boards this offseason. And so I think this would be really good value for him. I expect him to go day 2. I can't see him going day 1. And nice to have a white guy.
That's it. This generation's Julian Edelman, no doubt. Rich, 210.
Yeah, I'm going to go Blake Corum. Just a really nice, solid back. I think at this point in the draft, let's take some flyers and some running backs. And I think he's got some upside there.
And then Lewis, your last pick in this draft. Who are you going with? Take another one of you guys?
No, we have run out of guys by now. Jalen Wright, I'd go at this point. Really nice combine. The quickest for 5 yards in the 40 of any running back. Performed really well. Quite an explosive back. I can see him doing quite well in the NFL. And
Rich, take us home.
I'll go quarterback. I'm going to go Spencer Rattler. I think that every talent you would want out of a fantasy quarterback, Rattler has. I think everything we're hearing is that the NFL really like him. So I think he could be a great value.
Where would you like to see him land? Because obviously, once you start slipping past those top 15 picks in a draft, you're talking about teams who typically have their quarterback situation. So you're really looking towards the second, third round. What team do you think would be a good landing spot for the way that Spencer Rattler plays?
I'd love to see him go somewhere like the Giants, whether that be in round 2 or round 3. That I don't think the Giants perhaps are ready to throw everything out the window with Daniel Jones. But Spencer Rattler, let's go and spend, a competent pick, bring in Rattler. He can sit behind Jones. We'll know by week 8 that Daniel Jones isn't the long-time answer for the Giants. They can move on from the contract at the end of the season, and then Rattler's the kind of future quarterback moving forward.
If you've got players that we should have been picking in the first 2 rounds, we want to hear it. Leave a comment. We get back to every single comment, whether it's trade query, whether it's dynasty strategy. We will answer your comments. Tell us which players you liked, which picks you liked, which players we should have been picking, and who your sleepers are, because we've got loads of sleeper content coming your way over the next couple of months. Lewis, you can follow him at the Dynasty Pancake on Twitter, pumping out loads of content there. Anything you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
My Fantasy Sanctuary hat that I'm wearing. Because there's a big light on in front of me. You can't really see it. But no, just to say thank you so much for having me on. I talk with you guys every day in the Discord, but it's a delight to come on and talk some rookies with you. You can find the podcast at Wildcard Rewind. You can find all of my stuff at dynastypancake.co.uk. There's loads more stuff yet to come for the off season, including lots of stuff looking towards free agency coming up relatively soon. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely, one of our favorite people, someone everybody should be following. And when it comes to stuff we've got to plug before we get out of here, Rich's Rookie Guide, it is coming out very soon. 160 pages, so much stuff in there, so much great work. Rich has absolutely smashed it out of the park. If you want to get access to it, hit the join button down below, select Silver Sunset, $2.99 a month, less than $4 a month. It will absolutely get you set to smash in 2024. We'll be back soon.